Hi again, this is Bob Tribe, and welcome to another edition of Valley to Vietnam. Today, our guest is Lieutenant General John Goodman, who has 40 years of military service. He served with the 1st Infantry Division in the Army in Vietnam, and later was with the Marine Corps. So, John, you were born right here in Sacramento.
I was born at Mercy Hospital in 1945, November 1945.
So you lived at Dos Rios until
I was 5. At the end of my kindergarten year, my dad built a house out in Arden Park, and we moved to Arden Park in May or June 1950.
Right, and for anyone who doesn't know where Arden Park is, it's bounded on the east and west by Watt Avenue and Eastern, and on the north and south by, no, that's right, Arden and Fair Oaks Boulevard.
Right.
Yeah. Big.
Fair Oaks, Arden, Watt, and Eastern are the 4 bounding.
I remember all the homes there had huge backyards.
Big backyards, yeah. Ours was about 100 feet from the back of the house to the back fence.
Yeah.
And we butted up against the school grounds. So if I didn't like that yard, I just went out to the school grounds and played at Arden School.
Yeah, and that school's been there quite a while. So you moved to Arden Park then about 1950, and you were always interested in sports.
I don't know why, I just was. If it had a ball or rolled or did something, I loved doing it.
And you had older siblings.
I did. I had 2 older sisters and 1 older brother.
Right. And they were all athletic, or?
To the degree young women were athletic back then, yeah. I mean, we all went in the yard, we played. My sisters played everything with me. Yeah. And my brother ran like the wind. And the good thing was, as a little kid, I was 4 years younger than him. He included me with all his friends, so I had to play up to them.
Oh, nice.
You don't get to come if you, and of course, if you have a baseball game, you're always the last chosen, or the basketball game, it didn't matter. As long as I was chosen, I didn't care.
Yeah, sure.
And then you had to prove that you were worthy of being chosen.
And I knew your brother because he went to my high school, El Camino.
He did.
Although you didn't go there.
I didn't. In fact, my family, all my siblings, my neighbors across the street, next door, they all went to El Camino, and then I went to Encina. And then the kids next door and across the street after me went to El Camino. So I was just a 1-year Encina guy. And
tell me about this amazing growth spurt you had that you told me earlier about.
Yeah, I was in the 7th grade. We had a really interesting gym teacher. His name was Don Homer, he at the end of the school year every year, he would measure you, height, weight. He would give you goals for the summer, like do this, do that.
Gain 6 inches.
Yeah, and so he measured me at the end of my 7th grade year. I was 5'4", and I weighed 130 pounds. And I came back for my 8th grade year, and they measured us the first week of school, and I was 6'2", and I was 195.
Oh my God!
And that was an incredible.
You must have stretch marks or something.
Oh yeah, I grew so fast that my belly button, the cord in the belly button, couldn't grow fast enough, and I'd lay on the bed and go, "What's wrong with my stomach, Mom? It hurts." My mom bought me 3 sets of school clothes that year. She said, "If you grow anymore, you're not going to school."
And
cool.
And the interesting thing is, you were 6'2" and 195, and that's pretty much what you were for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not 6'2" anymore. I lost part of my back in Vietnam, and old age has reduced me. I'm about 6.5, 6'1", somewhere in there. But I weigh 190. I actually weighed this morning 193.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
So no wonder you were so good in sports. You were playing with a bunch of little midgets, for a while there.
Well, I was the midget for a long time.
Yeah. So you started Encina High School, and you went out for everything.
I did. They had this really interesting program. It shocked me. The gym teacher at our school had written to their athletic director, and if you had a potential in any sport, you got a letter asking you to come out and play football or basketball or baseball. And I got 3 letters, so I went out for 3 sports.
Well, so you played baseball, basketball, football, And then eventually you were running track too, right?
My freshman year, I actually didn't play baseball. The team was 500 kids. But I played football my freshman year, basketball my freshman year, and I made the JV team in both of those. And then I ran track. I did high hurdles, broad jump, and high jump. And then later, because as a kid I was on the Arden Park swim team, I swam on the swim team too. If we had away games and we just happened to be there, because I was pretty quick as a sprinter in the pool. Those long ones that killed me. Right. Couldn't do them.
And then you go from the Arden Park team to Arden Hills, right?
Right. I got recruited to do that. The first day at practice, Debbie Meyer was there, and we're swimming next to each other. And when she was as fast as me, I said, "I'm done. I can't."
She's a gold medalist, right?
If I can't beat a girl, I'm not going to do this.
She was incredible.
She was.
Yeah. Well, and Sherm Shavor, for those who don't know, was the coach or the owner and the coach at Arden Hills, and was an Olympic coach. And
he was.
I went to a wide world of sports there in the early 60s where you had, they went against the Santa Clara Youth Village, which was the #1 team in the world probably. And that was a great, great meet. They were just, you saw some, Arden Hills produced probably more Olympians than just about any facility.
He was churning them out. Spitz was a young kid when I was there with Debbie Meyer.
He lived on Safari Court right off Mission. I remember he came here just to be able to be coached by Sherm. And Arden Park was a great place to live just because you had a real park in Arden Park, and you had Cresta Park. And as I told you earlier, we used to play football in Cresta Park.
Yeah, everybody played football at Cresta Park.
Yeah, it was
For some reason, nobody played at Arden Park. Too big.
Yeah,
they went to Cresta Park.
Yeah, Cresta was great. Let's see, and we mentioned your siblings. Your oldest sister, Sharon, was how much older?
7 years older than me.
And your twins?
They were 4 years older than me.
Okay, Joyce and Jerry.
Yeah.
You mentioned going to a couple different places in Sacramento as you're growing up. For instance, you said maybe after a ball game your dad might take you to Sam's Hofbrau.
That was a big treat.
Yeah.
We didn't go, my mom didn't go there. They served beer. So my dad, after a game, particularly if we went down and played at Woodland or someplace like that, on the way home, we'd stop and get a ham sandwich at Sam's Hofbrau. That was a big treat.
Right.
And, going out was a big treat.
Sure.
We had enough money to be a good family, but we didn't go out to dinner a lot or anything like that.
No, we didn't either. I mean, just not like today.
Yeah, Sam's Hofbrau was a lot of fun. My mom occasionally would really give us a treat. On Sunday evening, we could go to like Harvey's Drive-In and get a hamburger. It was that's so cool.
Down on Fulton, I remember, we didn't go there because that was an Encina hangout, but I remember exactly where that was. And just across Arden Way from your street, El Nido, was a place called Harold's Drive-In.
Yeah. We weren't allowed to walk across the street. I mean, the rules were you don't walk across the street and go to Harold's and get french fries and stuff like that.
Right.
If you ever got enough money, though, you'd go over and get like a 19-cent bag of french fries and sit there with your buddies and eat french fries.
That was a big treat.
Yeah.
You said you never saw your folks smoke or drink.
Never. No. Wasn't alcohol in the house, no smoking. They never said anything. But the most important form of leadership is by example, and so, they didn't smoke and drink, I didn't smoke and drink. I was with a friend of mine just the other day, and he was telling a story about 3 or 4 really good friends of mine, and they went out one night, and right after Mariloma High School was opened, and they were drinking some beer. Now, they're in high school, and mind you, the drinking age is 21, and they had decided that after they had a few beers, they wanted to play basketball. Mariloma High School wasn't too far away, so they went over and snuck into the gym and were playing basketball and almost got caught. The night janitor was coming around, and they were pretty scared. And my reaction was, let me see, the law of the land is 21, and you decided you'd drink, so that's against the law. Then you drove while you were drinking, or after you drank, that's against the law. And then you managed to break into a gym, and that's against the law. How are we doing? You're friends of mine? Really?
Well, Yeah, I ran with some guys who were kind of into that kind of lifestyle. You said that one of the most significant movies that you saw as a young man was Midway.
Midway.
Yeah.
Yep.
And did you see it at the Starlight Drive-In?
I did, yeah. That was a huge treat, to go with the family and put the little speaker on the window, and, you know,
Right.
and it'd be hotter than Billy Blue Blazes, but then the coastal breeze would come in and start cooling off.
Yeah.
And the cartoons were incredible, but this movie, I wasn't very old. I don't know how old that movie was. And I don't know that the name was the Battle of Midway.
Right.
But it was about the Marines on Midway. And as the squadron, VMF 211, got dwindled down, there was one pilot left. There were 2 or 3 planes that they had managed to fix up, but one pilot left. And he went out and he intercepted a wave of Japanese bombers, shot down a couple of them, and got hit in the neck with probably a 50 caliber or 20 millimeter round. And came back, managed to land the plane, but then subsequently died. And the thing that really struck me twofold about that was his willingness to sacrifice himself to protect others,
Right.
and then their deference and their caring about him, and the real moving ceremony when they buried him on Wake Island just struck me. I probably was 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
It never left me, never.
Right.
I remember that movie to this day. I remember that scene to this day. It just really impacted me.
And you thought, someday maybe I'll be a pilot.
Someday I'm going to be a fighter pilot.
Yeah. Well, that came true. So when you graduated from Encina, you received a lot of scholarship offers. Were they all geared to football, or?
No.
Okay.
In fact, I had a couple of schools, smaller schools, one in Idaho, one in Utah, who offered me a full ride scholarship to come to school and play football, basketball, and baseball.
Okay.
I was really tempted, except it snowed there. Snow, I don't live in snow, I live in Sacramento. Everybody knows this, I don't go to snow. So I turned down all the Oregon schools, it rains there.
Yeah.
I turned down the Washington school, it snows up there. And it was clear from the very beginning, because the Trojans had won.
USC.
Yeah, they won the national title, and they'd gone to the Rose Bowl and won. They beat Vanderkillen in a great game. That I was going to USC, and John McKay waltzed into my house and said, "We want you."
Yeah.
And my parents thought that was pretty nice. The quick story is, the signing week, he came back. He came to my house on a Tuesday, and I'll never forget this lesson. He came in, said hi to my parents, the obligatory handshakes, how you doing? Turned to me, sat down across from me in the living room, and 2 or 3 minutes worth of, about the school, 2 or 3 minutes about my role in the team. And he said, normally I don't give forecasts, but he said, the intent is Nelson graduated this year, Bethard is graduating next year, is a sophomore. My plan is that you'll be our starting quarterback. And I went, okay, cool. And I had one rule. Whenever I went to school, I had to be able to play baseball.
Uh-huh.
I played football and I was good, but I loved baseball. And I was a natural baseball player. I just loved the sport. So as long as I could, if football was going to pay the bills and let me go to college, baseball was a sport I wanted to play.
Were you a pitcher?
I was. Well, I was actually an outfielder, and I loved playing the outfield. I could play first base. I was left-handed, so
Okay.
Being left-handed, they either put you at first base or in the outfield. You can't do
Yeah,
anything else.
sure.
You guys limp. You walk
Yeah.
the funny way. So the rule was, if you want me to play football, I'd be glad to, but I get to play baseball. And he said, yep. And they had gone to the NCAA tournament that year in baseball. They lost to a school called Arizona State. Anyway, so the decision was made. I was going to USC.
Right.
And then Thursday, this guy came from this school I'd never heard of in a place called Arizona that I'd never heard of. And he wanted me to go to school at Arizona State.
Yeah.
And he wanted me to be a quarterback there, and he offered me a full ride scholarship. And, but the way the routine came, if you remember how I told you McKay came into my house, well, he came in, said hi to my parents, obligatory introduction, sat across from me, talked to me about the school, the role I'd play in the school, my responsibilities, which McKay had never talked about. And then he moved over near my parents and sat down with my parents and talked to them for half hour, 45 minutes about developing young men, building character. Guess where my mom wanted me to go to school? And guess where I went to school? If Mom wanted that, that's what I did.
Was there a little bit of a battle there? Were you holding out for USC a little bit?
I was, but it didn't matter. She wasn't.
Yeah.
So I went to Arizona State. And the week after I signed, I signed, and, you know, Friday went to school, told everybody I signed with Arizona State. And the following week, one of the friends of mine came to school, and he had a Time magazine, and he set it down on the desk in front of me in my first period class, and I looked at it and said, Frank Cush, meanest coach in the land. What have I done?
And that proved to be true, right?
It was. He was
Yeah.
tougher than nails. He had been the OIC of the Fort Benning Jump School during the Korean War.
Oh, wow.
And he ran his football team like they did,
Yeah.
like the Army runs jump school.
And you and I both went through that.
We did.
Yeah. Now, tell me about that Wichita State game.
Yeah. That was my first game as a sophomore. We had a really good football team, but Arizona State's one of those children of a lesser god.
Right.
You know, so you can't be ranked first in the country, so we were ranked fourth.
Yeah.
And we had 2 All-American running backs at the same time, and a stable of running backs who were world-class sprinters, like Henry Carr, the world record holder and gold medalist, was one of our wide receivers. Ben Hawkins, a triple jumper, and a blah, blah, blah. I mean, these are all Olympians. But Charlie Taylor and Tony Lorick, who both signed, one with Baltimore Colts and the other one with the Washington Redskins, were the 2 starting running backs. And All-American tight end, I mean, and these coal miner kids playing offensive line who were tougher than nails. And we had a good team. And Wichita State had a pretty good team, but they had a running back named Mel Farr, Miller Farr's brother. Miller Farr was at UCLA, and Mel Farr, nobody had ever heard of, was at Wichita State. He was faster than his brother.
Wow.
And he was bigger. And at the halftime, and back then it was, today what we play, everybody knows, although we don't know anymore. That's called platoon football. So you can substitute a whole platoon.
Right.
Prior to that, if the ball turned over, you could substitute 3 players, and then on any given play, you could substitute 2. Well, I was pretty fast, not as fast as my brother and dad, but I was pretty fast, and I was a really good defensive back. So I was a starting safety on defense, and the senior quarterback, my sophomore year, was slower than a plow horse. So I got to start every time the ball turned over, I got to run the first play. The coach always told me, hand it off and don't do anything stupid. Okay. So we're playing Wichita State, and they're not even in the top 20. We're number 4. And at halftime, it's 13-13. And that's when I learned that blackboards really could be torn off the wall, and they could be turned in. You could get hit with one of them. And, I mean, the tongue lashing that we took at halftime, it wasn't that you wanted to beat Utah State, is you didn't want one of those again.
Yeah.
So you would go out and do anything to prevent that. So we went out, we won the game 31-13. I mean, we killed them in the second half. I mean, just hammered them. And, you know, one of the things, I'll never forget this line, these guys have come into your house and they're kicking you around in front of your parents and your friends and your neighborhood. Go out and kill them. So we went out and killed them. Anyway, so we, after the game was over and we played night games down in Arizona, as you might suspect, because it's a little warm, we went back to the practice stadium and he turned on the lights at 11 o'clock at night. We came off the field sometime after 3 in the morning. We scrimmaged, hit, ran, on and on and on.
So he deserved that reputation.
He did. He was mean and he was tough. And life to him wasn't somewhat about character. It was all about character. If you missed a tackle, that's a character flaw. And
Okay.
don't miss a snap count, because that's really bad.
And you played baseball there too?
I did. I didn't play my freshman year because I had to be in spring ball. But my sophomore year, I made the team, and because I was still playing spring football, I didn't travel most of the time with the team. I got to pitch at home games. But I also got to go to Omaha, and I got a World Series ring because we won the national title that year.
Oh, wow.
Rick Monday was on my team. Sal Bando was on my team. Reggie Jackson played 2 years later with me. So yeah, we had some pretty good ball teams back then.
Eventually, that's where Barry Bonds went, right?
Oh yeah, Barry Bonds,
Yeah.
Bump Wills.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you guys were a powerhouse. So you graduated in 1967,
I
right?
did, yeah, right on time.
You're 21
Somebody
years old.
said you're supposed to take 15 hours every semester, and at the end you graduate, so I took 15 hours. And
Yeah.
somebody said C's make degrees, so
Yeah.
they all added up, and I graduated.
Yeah, well, that worked out. And then you are drafted a couple times.
I was. I was lucky enough to be drafted by the New Orleans Saints. I think I went in the 4th round, almost positive it was the 4th round, and signed with them. They were the expansion team, the first time the NFL had expanded. And so I was lucky enough to go to rookie camp with Paul Hornung and Jim Taylor,
Wow.
Gary Quazzo. These were legends. You know, you watched them on television.
Right.
Yeah, Doug Atkins, he was a defensive end. If Cush was tough, Atkins was steel. And he had a locker right next to me, and he hated rookies. Wasn't that fun?
I've heard about the treatment of rookies.
Oh, yeah, it's awful. And a rookie quarterback who might actually play, he's dirt.
Oh, boy. So then you're drafted a second time.
I did. Hollywood couldn't even write this script. You have the little 3-letter mailbox in the school dorm.
Sure.
Well, I took my last final. My car is loaded. I'm going off to University of California at San Diego for a rookie camp the following week. So my car's all packed. I'm leaving. And I get this. There's a letter in my mailbox. I went, I've shut off all my mail. Why would I get that? Pulled it out. It said, "Greetings from the President of the United States."
Oh, boy.
So I came up with a bright idea. I would call the head coach and the general manager down in New Orleans, and I'd join the National Guard. Yeah, you're not going to do that. You got that draft notice. It's a Marine Corps or the Army.
Yeah, exactly.
So I took my draft notice and went in and reported.
Did you go in June?
No, well, at the end of June, but I went to
Yeah.
rookie camp first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I actually went to rookie camp, made the team, and then, got put on government loan.
Right.
The funny thing is, there were 2 things that happened that were really kind of funny. One is, after I graduated from basic training, I got sent to advanced infantry training down in Fort Polk, Louisiana. New Orleans just happens to be in Louisiana, and they found out about it. And they called up and said, "Can we borrow him on the weekends to play?"
Really?
And the Army said, "No, you can't do that." But the other thing that was kind of interesting, when I got back, the week I got back, and my wife, I called to tell them I was back, and I received a letter reminding me that I was the property of the New Orleans Saints.
Right.
The entire time I had an office when I was in the Marine Corps, I had that sitting on my desk reminding me that I was the property of the New Orleans Saints.
So you went to basic at Fort Lewis, and then you went to Fort Polk, and you went through the Tigerland program.
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
3rd Training Brigade, Tigerland.
And that was basically really geared towards Vietnam, right?
It was, everything you did was about Vietnam. From the
Right.
first day you checked in till the day you left, the way patrolling was set up, ambushes was set up, all the villages, everything we did and all our training, it was all geared toward lessons learned from Vietnam. And if things changed during it, there would be somebody there telling you the latest tactics or techniques that have been changed and that you needed to be aware of. They created things called quick kill courses where they issued us 20, it would look like M16, but they were BB guns.
Oh.
And you'd go through these jungles and they had these pop-up targets and you had, your hunter-killer teams and
Right.
you're moving to contact and the targets would pop up and you had to engage them and knock them down within 2 seconds, or you're out of there. Go back to the beginning, start over.
Yeah, no, most enlisted guys, once they finished basic and AIT, and if they were 11B's riflemen, they'd go to Vietnam from there, but you had more training.
I did. Well, New Orleans was trying to make a deal, and my platoon commander said, I've got a buddy who's up at Fort Benning, and so what we'll do is we'll send you up there, and you'll report to the jump school. You won't go through the training, though, and they'll pull you off to special services, and you can play football. Well, that's cool. So I went there, and the story I didn't tell you is when I first went in at Fort Lewis, you take these massive batteries of tests.
Right.
You remember those. And at the end of them, they called out 4 names. All 4 of us had college degrees, so
Yeah.
they already knew who they were going to call before they did it. And they wanted me to take a commission and go through basic training, graduate, wait, and then take the next class at Fort Benning, Georgia, and be an infantry officer.
Ah,
And I said, nope, that takes about 3 years, and doing what I'm doing now takes 2 years, and my math isn't that good, but to me, one's quicker than the other.
yeah.
Well, that really irritated somebody pretty big in the military, in the Army. And so when I got to Fort Benning, whoever that was found out I'd gone to Fort Benning, and I wasn't allowed to play football, so I went through jump training.
Okay.
But he had a buddy who was at Fort Knox, and so they sent me over through advanced infantry training.
Oh,
Advanced armored infantry training.
right.
So I went to Armored Infantry School, which was really probably the best kept secret in the Army.
Yeah, I never heard of it.
You drove everything that had tracks on it. That the
Tanks?
Army had, oh yeah, M48 tanks, all over the place. I mean, and you shot the main gun, I mean, you did everything. It was like, what would you like to do today? I'd like to go shoot the main gun on an M48 while moving at 50 miles an hour. Okay, let's go do that. It was just a kick. And then, after that, I went down to Fort Gordon, Georgia to try one more time. And when it became apparent I wasn't going to make it, they cut my orders and I was sent to Vietnam.
Yeah. So you arrived in Vietnam in January of '68,
I did, yep.
just before TET.
Just before Tet. I got there January 4th, 1968. And when I reported to the 90th Replacement Depot,
Right.
which was an incredibly cool place. It had its origins in World War I. It was the first replacement center stood up by the U.S. Army in World War I, so it had a long legacy. That part was neat. The fact that you were reporting as a combat infantryman to Vietnam was interesting.
Exactly.
Anyway, I still remember they pulled in these trucks, deuce-and-a-half trucks, 2.5-ton trucks, every day, just before breakfast, just before lunch, and just before dinner. And they had these massive formations. There must have been 4,000 or 5,000 of us, all lined up out there, and you're in your little barracks formations. I was bunk 25 and barracks 53 or something like that. Anyway, then they would call out names. And if your name was called, you went and got your gear and got on the truck. And so after about a day and a half, I hadn't been called. It's late afternoon, dinner's ready, getting ready, and I'm hungry. And all the big trucks pull up in one Jeep. And so they call out all the names, and when they come to this truck, they call out 10 or 15 names, and they all pile in. They come to the Jeep, they called out one name, me. I said, "You're with him." So I got in the Jeep with my bag and left. And I reported to the 1st Division. Now, why the 1st Division didn't need replacements, I was pretty thrilled. I guess there weren't a lot of guys getting hurt back then. So I was pretty happy with that. And the next thing you know, I was assigned to the 2nd Battalion, 18th Infantry.
Bravo Company.
Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 18th Infantry. And I was a standard, run-of-the-mill garden variety rifleman, private first class.
So were you with them when TET occurred then?
I was. By then, TET occurred right at the end of the month, 28, 29, January, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And we were out on a long-range patrol. And as you know, when you get to Vietnam and you served in the Army, there are all kinds of people back then from the draft of all kinds of backgrounds. You know, some are scientists, some are this, some are that.
Some are hillbillies.
And the first sergeant one day had been out for some reason with my platoon and was right behind me in my squad when we were out on patrol, and had noticed that my squad generally was paying attention to me. So I started being the squad leader just by de facto because they were looking at me. And so at the end of the day, I was called to the company commander's tent, and that evening, after a very short interview, First Sergeant Sullivan told me that I was going to be Captain O'Leary's battalion TACNET radio operator.
Wow.
So I left my rifle platoon and went to become the company TACNET operator. So I wasn't really happy about that, because first you have a box on your back. Now you're carrying all your combat equipment and now a box. And secondly, I had a long whip antenna that said, "Shoot me." Because if you don't get me, the company commander's right next to me.
Right.
But it worked out. And so for Tet, I was already his radio operator.
Okay. Now, at some point, you go to the 75th Ranger Battalion.
Right. During Tet, two things happened. We'd been out on patrol, and we were told to stand down. That we're going to, for some reason, there'd been this informal agreement with the Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong, that they were standing down and we were going to stand down. So we went into a night defensive perimeter. We were out in Indian country. So it was just the rifle company, about 150 or 60 guys. And that night, about 1 or 2 in the morning, we started getting some incoming fire, and it grew more intense. And by 3 or 4 in the morning, it was hand-to-hand combat in the middle of our defensive perimeter. But whatever went through us, and they estimated at about a division-sized strength of North Vietnamese, they moved on through. They were busy. They were heading to Saigon, and Saigon was only about 70 miles that way.
Yeah.
And they had things to do, and we weren't one of them. We took a lot of casualties that night. And your first real impact is when you're in a two-man fighting position, and one guy's firing one way, and your turn is firing the other way. He's outside the wire, and you're inside the wire. You know things aren't going well.
Yeah.
And then the next morning, when you're loading up body bags into helicopters, that's tough. That is about as hard as it gets.
But you weren't wounded there.
I was not. No, I was very lucky. You could have walked on the green tracers coming in. I mean, they were that thick, and the supersonic crack by your ears, that's getting pretty close when they're cracking right next to your ears. So, no, that wasn't. I was very lucky that night. Very, very lucky.
When were you wounded?
A few months later, after serving with the rifle company, because I'd been to jump school and because I could chew gum and walk, and I don't know, because I knew Frank Cush, I don't know. I was chosen. So I went over and I reported to India Company, 75th Ranger Regiment. There was a provisional battalion, but I never saw them, don't know what, they're never on any of my orders. Always said 75th Ranger Regiment. But I think it was like the 56th or 58th Ranger Battalion, provisional battalion that was formed. Indy Company was part of it.
Right.
But Indy Company was real, and they had a company headquarters, and my company commander he'd been through Ranger School, and he went over. That's probably the reason I went over. I just figured it out. Yeah, my company commander went over, so I went over.
Yeah.
Anyway, after going over, they formed up Ranger, 5-man Ranger LRRP teams, long range reconnaissance patrol teams, and he made me a team leader. And so for the rest of my tour in Vietnam, except right at the end for about a month, I was a patrol team leader.
And primary mission is recon. You're not supposed to engage.
Right. If you're engaging, you have really made a mistake.
Yeah.
You're supposed to go, not be seen, not be heard.
Because you're going to be outnumbered.
You're going to be outnumbered, and you're going to be in Apache country. So, to start with, we had really funny missions. My very first mission was to guard the brand new Huey Cobras that had just come in. I had I'm in a Ranger battalion or a Ranger regiment, and I'm guarding helicopters? Is there something wrong here? That took them about a week to sort out, and the next thing you know, we started going out on long-range patrols. And they got, as the division got better at what they really wanted to know and what they had organically to collect, they would then give missions that they really wanted to know about the area of influence rather than the area of direct engagement. And as they did, they kept pushing us further and further out, and pretty soon we're in countries where the United States didn't have people. And
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
One of the stories I told at my retirement, when I retired at my retirement ceremony, was I can remember the night I said, if I ever do this again, I'm going to fly. And I was tied in a tree in a country where you're not supposed to be. And we had been observing all day, and I was calling in night airstrikes, and it's about 2 or 3 in the morning, and these F-4s come in. Yeah. I think they were out of Benoit. Anyway, they come in, and the F-4s have all their lights off. I'm describing the target and calling them in and adjusting, and the F-4s, even if they shut off all their lights, if you look underneath, under their intakes, there's a little white light that blinks very slowly underneath, one under each intake. And they went right over my tree, and I'm looking at them as they made their last runs. You know, we're Winchester, we're out of here, see you later, good luck.
Yeah.
And they go home. And I went, if I ever do this again, I'm going to fly.
And then you're wounded. Tell me about that.
Well, we had been in one of those places where we don't have people, and we were coming back, and the mission had gone exceedingly well. And my team was moving. I was third in line. So I was third in the line of movement. And the lead guy knew when he did it. He hit a tripwire. Yeah. And he yelled, "Look out!" He dove. I could see him diving. And so he dove right, so I dove right. The guy in front of me dove left. I dove right, and the explosion went off, and luckily when I dove right, unknowingly, there was a fairly large tree right about here. The upper part of my body was behind the tree. The lower part of my body wasn't. So as the lower part of my body took the impact, and it just spun me around and threw me that way, it had to have been a 105 that they had captured and booby-trapped. The guy who jumped left, unfortunately, didn't make it. The lead guy who jumped right was really severely wounded. And the other 2 guys behind me, unfortunately, jumped left. So
everybody on the left side died.
Yeah, we lost. I lost 3 of the 5 of us.
Wow.
Anyway,
were you in?
We were still in. We were in the Chiricahua Mountains, and we were heading to Phoenix, if you know your Apache country.
Okay.
And we had a long way to go. And back then, I know you know this, when you went on those type of missions, you weren't in radio contact with somebody who could come and pick you up, and they weren't going to come and pick you up anyway.
Or you just got clicks or something like that.
So yeah, so you had to move back to your pickup point, and this particular pickup point was going to be on a river, and one of the riverine craft, the Navy riverine craft, was going to pick us up. So we had probably about 30 miles to go.
Oh my God.
And I was in much better shape than he was, so we worked our way back. And some of the things we had to do at Arizona State helped a lot. But I carried him back.
And then you had they had to come back to get the guys who were KIA, or?
We did. I formed about a week and a half, 2 weeks later, we went back and got them. Yeah, we went back, and they were still there. Luckily, they had not been disturbed. They just left.
Then you were hospitalized for a while?
I was. Most of the stuff was superficial. I mean, I bled like a stuffed pig.
Yeah.
But I had a couple of small penetrations in my stomach, and one in an unmentionable area. Luckily, it missed all the important parts. And they were deep enough that I was beginning to get some infection, and So they hospitalized me in Long Binh, which is down, I guess it was about 30 miles north of Saigon.
Right.
Big Army hospital there. And when I got well enough, they sent me over to Vong Tau on the coast. Flew me over by helicopter for in-country 1 week R&R. And I reported to the hospital, stayed in the hospital there, and in the recovery ward. And then they had a couple other things wrong. I had lost all hearing in my left ear, and I had a concussion, probably my third or fourth by then, because playing football, you get some of those. But today, they would have said it was traumatic brain injury. Back then, I just got my bell rung, and I was told to take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning.
Yeah.
So I went over there, and we swam in the ocean 3 times a day. The salt water was designed specifically to help.
Yeah.
And then you took salt baths as well, and it did. I mean, I healed really quickly.
Yeah.
And returned to my unit, and picked up 3 new team members, and we went through training again, and then went back on patrol.
But you weren't wounded again?
No, I was only hit once, and I was lucky. I was a really, really lucky person.
And then, in order to kind of finish your service, you extend?
Yeah, well, I think it was November or December, I don't remember the exact month, I got a set of, here's where you're going to go. And they were going to send me to Fort Polk, Louisiana, to be a Tiger Land instructor. And I was not interested in going to Fort Polk, Louisiana. I had gotten married just before I left to go to Vietnam. And I was not going to take my wife down there, and I was not going to entertain going down there without my wife. So those two, I'm not. And I wrote my wife a letter, and as I mailed it, I didn't wait for the answer. I extended in country. And that was one of 2 decisions I made in my life where I did something unilaterally.
Yeah.
Never done it since, but I did it back then.
Imagine she wasn't too happy.
She wasn't happy. I mean, she was furious, and she was in college still.
Yeah.
So, you know, she was pretty worried. I mean, she knew by now that I'd been wounded, and she knew by now that it was getting a little hot over there, and yeah, it was an interesting time.
So you got out of the active duty Army when?
I flew back on January 28th. I left country January. Well, actually, I left January 29th. That's right, the time date line. Yeah. And a quick story on the way back. We flew out of Vietnam in a 707 and landed in Yokota Air Base. And just so happens, my wife's dad, my father-in-law, is a colonel at Fuchu Air Station, Japan. And as soon as we landed, I went to the phone and called him. And he and my mother-in-law got in the car and came over to see me. Well, I waited and waited, and they didn't come. So I said, traffic, and we got on the plane. Well, remember, my dad's a colonel in the Air Force. Right. And he called the base commander, who's a colonel, and they're buddies, old World War II drinking buddies, and said, hold that plane.
Nice.
And as the engines started and then shut down, you know, everybody on the plane is like, oh, no, they're going to send us back to Vietnam. And the doors open, and there stands my dad and my father-in-law and my mother-in-law. You know, and they called me up. Nobody said a word. Everybody was a real gentleman. And I went up, you know, and got the little reunion out of the way that lasted 30 seconds. But my mother-in-law says, I'm going to see that kid. And then when the doors closed, I mean, the booing started, and they threw hats at me and everything else. And quite frankly, you know, they were jealous because their in-laws couldn't be there. Yeah. You know, I mean, they were all wonderful about it. But yeah, then we flew straight from there back to Travis Air Force Base, and then went down to Oakland, to the Oakland Army Terminal, where I'd left, and I was processed out that day.
Okay.
So January 29th, 1969.
Now, did you suffer at all from PTSD?
Well, I didn't know what PTSD was.
Right.
Like I didn't know what traumatic brain injury was.
Right.
And I didn't know that a burst eardrum never completely heals, and I didn't know some this and that and all those other things. But I was, I probably would have had some problems, and I did have some problems. And I guess, if I don't manage myself right, watch the wrong movie, I'll have problems at sleeping tonight or whatever. But when we got finished, there was one friend of mine, one guy that I had met in advanced infantry training who came back on the same plane with me. We'd both been discharged. And he and I went to Denny's. My mom wasn't going to be there, and my mom and wife weren't going to be there for like another 45 minutes or an hour, and we were hungry. They hadn't fed us all day. And so we go to Denny's, which like a block or two away. And we're in our Alpha uniform, because we've been mustered out now. I mean, I got a big wad of cash in my pocket, and I'm ready to go. And we walked through the door, and the young lady came up, and we said and so she was walking us down, and the typical Denny's where you have all the booths on the side and the tables in the middle. We're walking between the two. And somebody made a comment to us, and I'm pretty sure I thought I heard what it said, but I couldn't have meant that. So we walked on down and sat down and ordered something real quickly, and got it and ate it and got up to leave, and the group was still there. And some disgusting looking long-haired guy was sitting there with his arms leaned back, and he's got a couple of babes around him, and he makes a comment, "Baby killer." I mean, it was all I could do to prevent my left hand from going out and absolutely crushing his throat.
Right.
I mean, had I let myself go, I would have killed him right there.
Yeah.
To accuse me of killing somebody unintentionally, I mean, I knew I had served honorably. I had known what I had done was honorable. I felt what I was done was in service of my country, and I thought what we were doing was the right thing to be doing. I supported the policies of the President of the United States and the government of the United States, and I had no qualms about going and serving. And to have somebody say that to me who doesn't know who I am and what I stand for just hit me to the core. Yeah. So whatever I was going to possibly go through was magnified greatly by that one incident. And I've never forgotten it. We'll never forget it. And today I'm often lucky enough to be asked periodically to talk to people, sometimes at fundraising events and so on. Mm-hmm. And I always take time to talk to the American people and tell them I give them very high marks for being able to understand the difference between national policy and the young men and women, daughters, brothers, sisters, parents, who are serving their country and serving lawfully and receiving and giving and executing lawful orders. There's a difference, and I give our country high marks today for understanding the difference between the two. Argue the policy all you want. I mean, knock down, drag out verbal discussions over it, but when the decision is made at the end of the day, and a son, a daughter, a brother, a sister, a mom or a dad is given a lawful order, and they serve in the cloth of our country, you better support them.
Amen. If you're against the war,
keep it to yourself once the debate is over.
Blame the war, not the warriors.
Absolutely.
So, does this mean once you get out that you go to the Saints again, or what?
It does. I got back in January. Football season was over. Saints didn't make the playoffs as usual. So in the spring, I needed to get a job, but it needed to be temporary. We had needed to earn some money because my wife has not finished college yet. Right. And I gave my solemn word to my in-laws while she was a freshman in college when we got married, that she would graduate, and she would graduate on time. So I had to earn some money so we could go back to college and get her degree. So that spring I worked here in Sacramento. I first went to work for a Gerlinger Auto Parts
Oh, I know that
store.
place.
Yeah.
Yeah. We used to go
Great
there.
little place to work.
Yeah.
You know, I was sort of a stock boy,
Was that
delivery.
downtown?
Yeah,
Yeah,
downtown.
Down by 21st Street or so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, K or
Yeah.
L, or I don't know, one of those
Right.
streets over there.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, and it was a great little job, but then, you know, the camp came, and I went to camp and made the team. And my note that year was that in the first preseason game, I was allowed to play, and it was, I don't know, second or third quarter, whatever it was. Then maybe third quarter, I finally got in. We hadn't scored, so, you know, I called a pass play, and I threw the first touchdown pass of that's the 69th season for the New Orleans Saints.
Oh, nice.
I was pretty happy about that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we went into the regular season, and in the first or second game, Billy Kilmer, who was the quarterback, got hurt. So this young guy, me, who hadn't played in a couple of years, got to play, and finished the game and played another game. And in the latter part of the second game I was playing, late in the game, I threw a ball. I was throwing a ball to the left side, and the linebacker on the right side got around our tackle.
You didn't see him coming.
I not only didn't see him coming, when I threw, he hit me, and it was under my arm. So he got me under the armpit, which means I went up in the air. We kind of floated for a second, and when we landed, both of us together, it was in a perfect line here, and I detached my clavicle.
Wow.
And while visions of grandeur of being a pitcher on the Dodgers went away, because I was a left-handed pitcher,
Yeah.
visions of playing football anymore went away as well. That was almost as painful as getting wounded in Vietnam.
I'll bet.
Anyway,
We would have only allowed you to pitch for the Giants.
I was a Dodger fan, die-in-the-wool Dodger fan.
Well, we won't advertise that. We'll delete that. So then, you went to work for the tax company.
I did. I came back here, tried to rehab. The Sacramento Capitals were in existence at the time.
Okay, yeah, I remember that.
And the owner of the Sacramento Capitals owned H&R Block, the franchise for Northern California, Oregon, and Washington.
Right.
Big business. And through the season, you know, he got to know me a little bit. I was good enough, I rehabbed enough, and I had healed enough that I could play towards the end of the year. And so I got to know the owner. His name was Lee Baldarelli. I got to know the owner a little bit. He asked me one day, "What's your degree in?" And I said, "Business administration and accounting." And so after the season was over and it was apparent I was sort of not doing all that well,
Right.
he said, "Are you going to try to play with New Orleans next year?" And I said, "I'm going to try, but I got to take my wife and we got to go to college in the spring semester." So we went to the spring semester at Arizona State, and she went to school, and I got traded to the 49ers.
Oh.
I was pretty pleased. Steve Spurrier had not worked out. And Spurrier was a year older than me in college, and John Brody was getting a little longer in the tooth.
Right.
And I was traded to become the backup quarterback for the 49ers. And I was thrilled, and they gave me a great contract. I had a pittance quarterback, a pittance contract with the New Orleans Saints, but San Francisco gave me a really good contract, and I reported, I guess it was May, I flew up there from Arizona State and took my physical, and the doctor told me, "You hurt that shoulder again, you will be an invalid for the rest of your life." And I was thinking about the letter I wrote to my wife in Vietnam. I'm extending, and then extending without talking to her, and I said, "If I keep this a secret, she could kill me." I'm not worried about getting hurt, but I am worried about her killing me.
Right.
So I went back and fessed up, and she said, "You're done. I don't like the environment anyway, you're done."
Yeah.
And so we were done. And when
That was May of what year?
that was May of
70?
May of 70.
Okay.
Yeah, May of 70. Yes, May of 70. Like, you get confused with
Sure.
the spring of 69 and the fall of 69. It was almost
Right.
like 2 years. Well, anyway, so she finished, got her degree that summer. We drove up and saw her parents and came to Sacramento. My assumption was we'll just live in Sacramento without really consulting my wife. Well, anyway, we came here, and I was looking for a job, and I decided I wanted to go over and say hi to my former coach, who was with the Sacramento Capitals, and drove down to the corporate office for H&R Block here on Watt Avenue. And it just so happens the owner was there, Lee Baldarelli. And he had told me, and I'd forgotten, of course, when you're finished, come back here, come and see me when you first get here. And so I walked in, and we shook hands, and he said, "So you're back?" And I was kind of surprised. I went, "Well, yeah." And then he said, "Well, I got a job for you." And that solved my problem of job hunting. So I became the assistant district manager for Northern California for H&R Block.
Uh-huh.
And then little by little, my duties expanded. He had a lawyer, an accountant, a district manager, and a course instructor, because every year they run courses. And the course instructor got a better offer from Sac State, so I became the course instructor. And then the lawyer got a better job, and I became the guy who represented people when you got audited.
Wow.
And but luckily I'd gone with him enough that I actually knew the business. I knew what to do. I knew how to prepare people. I knew when you were in trouble, and I knew when you weren't. And you don't need to be a lawyer to go talk to the...
So this is a pretty good job.
It was a great job. I mean, it was fun. You were a jack of all trades, and you were brand new. It didn't matter. Yeah, this job has to be done. It's got to be done right. Get it done.
Right.
So over the course of the next 6 months, we got ready for the tax season. I taught classes. I ran the instructor cadre for Northern California. It was a fun job. And then one day in, I don't know, January or February, I said, I can't see myself doing this for the rest of my life. And by then, he'd moved me down to the corporate headquarters down in Alameda.
Oh, okay.
And my wife and I were living on the island Alameda. And I said, I'm not going to do this the rest of my life. I looked around, and I made a decision. I said, I have a degree in accounting. I have a degree in business administration and accounting. And so I'm going to go talk to the FBI. They like me. I know they do. And I have a previous profession, and so I'm gonna be qualified. Took the test, passed. Took the first interview, and I don't know, I assume I passed. And I had to go back for the second interview, where the guy from the big headquarters came out to talk to you. And I went over to the San Francisco Federal Building in, I think it was May, and saw this metal sign sitting out front of the Federal Building. It said, "The Marines are looking for a few good men to fight a phantom." That's me. Had a guy with a black helmet looking over the nose of an F-4 into the cockpit with a big black mustache. I said, "That's me." I went downstairs and joined.
And you hadn't talked to your wife about this?
No, I forgot that part too.
Oh, boy.
So that was,
That's-
I never went to the FBI. I joined the Marine Corps, and 38 and a half years later, I retired.
Wow. And, just to kind of highlight some of the stuff in the Marines.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah.
I have here, first you went to Officer Kennedy School.
I did. I've been a lot of places. I will tell, on the record, I've been to Vietnam, I've been to jump school, I've operated in and out of country, I have blah, 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 blah. I went through Cush's camp, I run up Mount Cush. By far, the toughest thing I have ever done, by an order of magnitude, was go to Marine Corps OCS.
Yeah.
It was the toughest thing I'd ever been through, and it made me tough.
I felt that way about Army OCS,
Yeah.
jump school, special forces, basic AIT. OCS was the toughest.
Well, all those guys are staff NCOs, and someday you're going to give them an order, you better be worthy, because they're going to make you pay the price.
And then after that, you're going to aviation training, right?
I did. Because I had been to Vietnam, already served, I'd been an infantryman. The Marine Corps, when you get commissioned, it's only mine was a 12-week course to get commissioned. And that makes you a ready to get trained. And then you go to lieutenant school.
Right.
They call it the basic school, and it's a 6-month-long school. The Army combines them into one, the Marine Corps separates them. And in there, you gain, every Marine officer is a platoon commander.
Right.
That's platoon commander training program. And then out of there, they select all the MOSs. Well, Vietnam was still going. They needed pilots, and they needed them badly. And I had a contract, and I went straight to Pensacola. So I didn't have to go through the basic school. And I started flight training in January of '71.
Flying A4s, maybe?
No. Well, first plane I flew was a T-34, because I was in Naval Aviation
Training,
Flight
yeah,
School, yeah.
right.
T-34, cool prop.
Yeah.
Cool, I mean, a really cool prop airplane. And then I was lucky enough, I graduated #1 in my basic class. So, and they had one jet seat available for Marines, and I got it.
Oh, nice.
And I went to Meridian, Mississippi, and flew T-2s, the little guppy. Fun airplane. And then went into advanced jet training, flew A4s, TA4s at Meridian, and then I was selected to go to F4s, and so I was sent to Yuma, Arizona for F4 conversion training. And when I got there, there were 9 of us that showed up at once from all around the Navy Aviation Training Command. And the F4s had a backlog of 6 months. You were going to wait for 6 months before you saw the cockpit.
Jeez.
And the A4s were starting a class that following Monday, and there was no backlog.
Now, what's the distinction between an F4 and an A4?
Okay, the F4, which we nicknamed the lead sled, was a fighter that had a radar in the nose, so it was a fighter airplane that could drop bombs.
Right.
The A4 was designed to be a single airplane penetration, could deliver a nuclear weapon or any conventional weapons. It was a very nimble, light attack airplane. Navy flew it and the Marine Corps flew it.
Carriers.
Yeah, off carriers. And for the operations officer of the aircraft group talked me into going A4s. And best decision I ever made, by far.
Okay, then you're going to end up with, is it Marine Attack Squadron 223?
Yeah, VMA 223, the World War II originated squadron with a Walt Disney logo on the side, the Fighting Bulldogs.
Yeah.
It was, back then it was VMF 223, F for fighter, A for attack. Yeah, first squadron. In that one, two unique things happened, and I told you early, the decision to go A4s was brilliant.
Right.
The first one was I became a landing signal officer, the guy who stands on the back end of the ship and waves plane aboard. What a great education. I mean, you learn more about flying and about how to precisely fly airplanes, watching other people make mistakes,
Right.
trying to help them fix it.
Yeah.
And the other one was because, you know, one of the things that's really interesting is if people want to become pilots, the first thing you want to do, if you have a dream of flying, start playing football, basketball, baseball, or any other sport, because it translates directly. The ability to make decisions under pressure and do things athletically and physically while you're doing things mentally, that's flying. And flying fighters that's a skill you need. So anyway, a new program stood up, and we became the host squadron for a air-to-air range outside Yuma. And I became an adversary pilot for all of the guest fighter squadrons. So as a first lieutenant, I had more flight hours than most majors, and I had more simulated air combat than most people had after 50 years of flying.
Wow.
All in an impacted 3-year period. I was really flying a lot of hours. It was a great time.
Does this include the Marine Corps Weapons and Tactics Instructor School?
Well, what happened is that squadron that I was with after that time was sent overseas. We went over right at the end of the Vietnam War, the surge, when the negotiations weren't going well in Paris. we surged over, took our squadron with brand-new airplanes over to Vietnam. When we got there, the surge was stood down because the North Vietnamese came back to the negotiating table, so we stopped in Iwakuni, Japan. We didn't go into Benoit.
No.
And stayed for a year
Uh-huh.
over there. When we came back, I got orders, and the orders were, the Marine Corps had been studying the Vietnam War and said, we've got to prepare ourselves for the next war. And they ended up with, they had, for aviation, they had 25 projects. Project 19 was to stand up a weapons and tactics school
Okay.
and improve the way we teach instructors how to teach squadrons. And I became the head instructor for the A4s in that initial program.
Okay.
So the first thing I had to do was go through the course, and graduated, and I graduated, and then I became the head instructor.
And then you're also going to go to the Air Force Weapons School and the Navy
Yeah,
Weapons School.
right. As we stood up, it became apparent we didn't want attack pilots and fighter pilots. We wanted people who could fight their way in on their own and fight their way out on their own. We were preparing to fight the Soviet Union on the main plane in Germany.
Uh-huh.
And our A4 squadrons and our F4 squadrons and our A6 squadrons had to fight their way in individually because we didn't have the ability to put massive packages together like we did over North Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
So I went off up to the Air Force Fighter Weapons School. It was a 8-week-long program. Took my airplane with me and went up and flew through. It was an F4 squadron that I flew through with, but I flew my A4 with them. By the way, A4s can kick the rear ends of F4s.
Really?
Just want you to know that.
Okay.
Anyway, so I went through that school and graduated, and then because one of the things we had to be was really good at air-to-air because we didn't have radars in our airplanes. So we were always going to be in a knife fight with somebody. So I went to Top Gun as an adversary pilot with my little A4.
Yeah.
And went through the whole course and graduated, and then stayed there for 2 classes and fought as an adversary against all the Top Gun students going through.
Oh my God, you're Tom Cruise.
No, I was killing Tom Cruise.
That'll teach him. I think he's kind of a twerp. Then you go to Marine Command and Staff College.
Yeah. After my tour in the Marine Aviation Weapons and Tactics Squadron, I was sent to Command and Staff College for a year. And that's when I first discovered that you can make more than C's and it matters. And I really learned to become a really good plans officer. I was just struck by how much that fit with what I liked, how it fit with my personality, how it fit with all of the analytical skills you learn as a baseball player and as a football player. You know, he's doing this, what should I do, that sort of thing, the action, reaction, counteraction. It just fit, and I studied like crazy and graduated as an honor graduate out of Marine Corps Command and Staff College. And from then on, you know, that was kind of my life.
And so then you go to F/A 18 training.
Right. I came out of Command and Staff College, now I'm a major, and served for a while as an operations officer of a squadron and a group, and had my FA-18 conversion training. Before I went, had to go serve with the 3rd Marine Division on Okinawa.
Okay.
So I was a division air officer, and then while I was there, I was made a battalion commander. That was cool.
Yeah.
Being a pilot and being a battalion commander
No kidding.
of an infantry battalion,
Yeah.
that was cool. Anyway, so I came back and then went to F-18 conversion training. And if you took all of the few good features from the F4 and all the great features from the A4 and put them together and put 2 engines on a supersonic airplane that could outmaneuver any airplane in the world, you have the F-18.
Really?
What a great jet. It was like flying 3 computers, 500 to 800 miles an hour through the air and playing video games. You had a combined heads-up display up here that
Yeah.
you fought the whole airplane through that thing. and then you had 2 TVs here and a third TV here. It's like playing 3 video games. You're moving through the sky supersonically. People are flying around. You got 2 wingmen. Talk about fun game.
Do we still use them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're all, in fact, the Navy just let a contract for, I think, another 200 F-18s to continue them until the F-35 matures.
It's nice to know that we got great aircraft.
We do.
You go to War College?
I did. I was selected to the first Marine Corps War College class.
Oh.
And during that class, Desert Storm broke out. Now, the funny story about this is I was squadron commander, and I was out on a tour in the Western Pacific, brought my squadron back, and as soon as I gave up command, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. And I'm driving, I had just left town, and my group commander called me and said, "Turn around and come back. I'll give you your squadron back. We're going to war." Cool, I'm coming. But I'd been selected to go to War College, and I had orders. You don't just do what you want.
Yeah.
So I called Headquarters Marine Corps and talked to the guy who issued the orders, and he said, "That's the first War College class, and that's the Commandant's pet project. You want out of those orders, you got to call the Commandant." Well, the Commandant was a guy named Al Gray then. So I, believe it or not, I had enough nerve. I called Al Gray, and he said, "You have 2 choices. You can go to class, or you can resign."
Well, that makes it simple.
Okay, so going to class. So I went to War College class, and partway through in the fall, in November, in fact, on the Marine Corps birthday, we were at the Marine Corps birthday ball that year in 89 or 90, 90. And guy walked up to me and said, "You need to be in the basement of the Warfighting Center tomorrow morning at 0600. Okay. It's 10 o'clock at night. I'm in Washington, D.C., and I got to be in Quantico the next morning. Okay. So I reported the next morning, 6 of us, and we began churning out campaign plans for Desert Storm. And we were working for the Commandant of the Marine Corps and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Mm-hmm. And over the course of the next month or so, month and a half, we churned out kind of the framework of the left hook and each of the roles each of the services would play and how the coalition would fit together. And at the end of that, I then was asked to develop the full plan for the Marine Corps in Desert Storm. And so my War College class and I developed a straw man or outline plan, put it in slide form and briefed it. And we briefed it to all the general officers of the Marine Corps who were still in the United States. And the Commandant said, "You're on a plane tomorrow going to Kuwait to meet General Boomer." Okay. So I ran around and got a .45 caliber pistol and some ammunition and some desert camis, which you don't own, I mean, they're issued to you. And got all set and flew off. And next thing you know, I was the head of plans for 1 MEF. And we planned the attack into Kuwait.
Wow.
And I came back when the war was over.
Well, you've had several other positions since then. You were, let's see, director of the School of Advanced Warfighting.
Right.
You were commander of Marine Aircraft Group 41.
Mm-hmm.
Director of Strategic Plans and Policy of U.S. Southern Command.
Correct.
And I think your last position was Commander of Marine Forces Pacific.
It was.
So that's a lot of Marines, I assume.
The Marine Corps has 3 main operating forces. One, the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force, and the 3rd. And they're essentially, for Army-centric things, they're a corps-sized unit.
Okay.
2 of the corps were under Marine Forces Pacific.
Oh, okay.
The one in Camp Pendleton and in California and Arizona, and the one out in the Pacific.
And how many divisions under a corps?
2 divisions, 2 aircraft wing, and 2 logistics groups, about 95,000 Marines.
Wow.
And then I also, that command until, from 2005 to 2007, I was dual-hatted. I was also the commander of Marine Forces Central Command. So I had Iraq and Afghanistan under me as well as the Marines in the Pacific. Luckily, I had a jet, so I was flying back and forth doing both. So I had, depending on what war you were talking about, you know, at Iraq one time, I had about 25,000 Marines under me fighting in Iraq, about 8 or 10, up to 20,000 in Afghanistan. And if there were war in Korea, there'd be 230,000 Marines there, and you had to go to war games there twice a year. And so it was a really interesting time in my life, quite frankly. Very interesting.
That's a huge command. You retired in 2008.
I did. When I retired, I made the decision I wanted to do something different. I was offered the job as the Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, which you had to go to Washington, D.C., and I'd never served there, and I said, I'm not going. I'm done. I've served in 4 decades. It was a total of 42 years I'd served. I thought that was enough.
Yeah.
And so my wife and I, after talking about it, and I did talk to her about this one.
That's good.
Made the decision we were going to retire, and the Secretary of Defense called me as soon as I put my letter in and said, I want you to take over an agency in Hawaii. It's called the Center for Excellence in Disaster Management, and what you do is you train not only the U.S. military on how to respond to disasters and support civilian agencies, but you're going to go around with our partners and allies around the world and help their countries get organized, trained, and you're going to train their militaries. Okay, sure. So I took the job.
So have you been doing that ever since?
I did that from 2008 to 2012.
Okay.
But the reason I decided to resign was in 2012, between when then United Airlines, whenever they roll their account over, I had 6 months on my United account that year, 350,000 air miles in 6 months. And I said, you're wearing me out. I got to stop.
Wow.
So I resigned, and as soon as I did, I was called by a company in California, and they asked me if I would become the chairman of their board.
Oh.
And so I accepted the job, and then shortly thereafter I was called by the Special Inspector General for Afghan reconstruction in Washington, D.C.
Uh-huh.
And they were looking to bring somebody from the military on to be a senior advisor, and because of my experience, not only in leading about 8 or 9 disaster responses in the Pacific in my 4 years there, but also my time at the Center for Excellence. They wanted me to come and do it. So today I still work for them. I fly back to Washington, D.C. about every other week, and
okay.
I see them, and then I advise them. They call me, they send me emails, and like last week, we were in meeting both with the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman on the next U.S. policy for Afghanistan and our findings relative to train, advise, and assist in what they've done. And anyway, there's an interesting policy coming in, I think a good one.
Oh, good. Well, General, I think that sort of concludes. I just want to thank you so much for coming today and telling your story. It's a great one. This is going to be a hallmark for us, so we're excited to have you.
It was just my life. It's fun.
I thank, the library, James Scott and Jerry Ward, for coming up with this project and asking me to be part of it, and it's something I love doing. So, but
this is good. It's necessary. We didn't do enough of this with the men and women who served our country in World War II and in Korea.
That's for sure.
And Vietnam. If Korea was the forgotten war, the Vietnam was the hated war.
Right.
And I think it's the right thing to do. I think generations in the future need to be able to hear that it is important to serve your country, and it is important to learn what service really is. And if this helped to any degree, I'm thrilled to do it.
Well, I'm proud to know you, and I thank you very much
for
coming today.
Yeah, thank you.
And you're a hometown boy.
I am.
I mean, born
this is my home.
Born here and raised here, and so we're really happy to have you. So then I guess I have to close out and just say this concludes another episode of Valley to Vietnam, and join us next time. Thanks for listening or watching.